Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the RepPath Podcast. Today, guys, we have a different kind of show today because we're going to get into the psychology of what doctors are thinking, and why do doctors say no? Okay, and I'm not saying every time they just say no all the time, but I want you guys to realize, especially a lot of you guys, this is for individuals that are breaking in, been in this industry for over 20 years, that you just can't figure out, especially for the younger, the individuals just breaking in. You're going to come in, you're going to be fired up after training, and then get out there in front of doctors, give that great messaging, do everything right, and then all of a sudden they're still saying no or they're not using you. Okay, so we're going to talk about that today and get into the psyche of what they're thinking and why they do things a certain way, because this is going to help you become a better sales rep. But before we get into that, guys, as always, please make sure if you're listening in, submit any questions from this moment on, and we'll handle them about halfway through the call today. Any of you out there that are still struggling, you're still getting rejected, you're getting ghosted, you don't understand, I'm networking with people, but no one gets back to me. I think I did my resume right. I think I'm interviewing right. I just don't get it. Stop wondering. Stop stressing yourself out, guys. Join the RepPath Academy today. Click the link below, reppath.com. You could see here on the screen, you can learn more about, me and my background. You could see, some of the companies that we've worked with, throughout the country, all, from small to big name companies. And then lastly, go to the bottom of the page, see those testimonials from candidates that have broken in through the academy and are achieving, great success in this industry. Lastly, guys, if you want to see a copy of this podcast or any other content that we produce, please go on, again, click on the screen below, click on my YouTube channel, the RepPath Academy, and subscribe. It's 100% free. You'll be able to get all this information that's on the screen here and everything else that we produce, moving forward. So we're going to dive right in, guys. Just pull up my notes. And let's talk about why doctors say no. Okay. So there have been many instances when reps come in there, they have a great product, they have clinical data, the doctor even likes them, thinks they're a nice person, but they still say no. They still don't move forward. Okay, guys? And there's reasons for that. All right? It's not that they're saying no, to you. It's because, you have to think about, how doctors are, because they're not traditional buyers. Their decision making is influenced by a couple of different things, many different things, but a couple of the key things are risk, time, evidence, workflow disruption, and peer perception. There's many more. So if you understand the psychology of how a doctor thinks and know that background, it's going to help you sell better and become a better sales rep. So let's talk about some of these. First thing, physicians are risk managers. You have to think that way, guys. They are risk managers. They're not buyers like the typical buying that we do in most of our other sales jobs. They're about alleviating risk, okay? Because their decisions are very important. They affect patient outcomes, malpractice, their reputation, and then also their hospital relationships amongst any other kinds of relationships. So these are very important decisions. So when a doctor is taking on or listening to a new product description, medical, pharmaceutical, drug, sales call or presentation, they're thinking to themselves, could this harm my patient? Will this complicate the procedure? What if something goes wrong? So they're thinking about the risk, guys. Okay. So it's easy for them to maintain the status quo. And I remember one time I was in a presentation and I was listening to an anesthesiologist talk. And this was our third day. This was during a training for one of the anesthesia companies that I was working with. And this is our third day in training. And we were in the same room every day. And the doctor goes to us, he goes, because they were talking about how it's hard to get doctors, to buy our product. Why is it so challenging? He goes, let me just ask you this. This is your third day in here. He goes, where did you sit every day? And every day I was like, oh shit, I went to the front of the room, like second seat to the left. I went in the same seat every day. They didn't assign seats, but that's the seat I picked the first day. And then I went there the next 2 days in a row. And he goes, see how stupid that is? You're just picking a seat and you got comfortable in that seat. No one told you you can't go anywhere else, but you went in that same comfort zone every day. He goes, that's the way doctors are, but multiply that by 1,000,000. Okay, if they're getting good results, they're happy in that spot. They're happy you doing a certain workflow, using a certain procedure, using a certain drug. A lot of times it's difficult to get them to switch because that's what they're used to. We picked the same seat that we went in for 3 days in a row because we got comfortable. So it's not even just doctors, it's human nature. You're going to go in your comfort zone. So that's one of the most difficult things to break up, those habits that doctors have, good or bad. It's very difficult to break those habits. So you got to realize that, guys. They're always going to stick with that status quo. They tend to prefer things that they already know that are a couple of different reasons. If it feels safer, it has proven outcomes, and if they're comfortable with it. So they think to themselves, if this current device works, why change? So you have to realize it's not so much about selling your product. It's about reducing that risk to change. We're going to talk more about that. Next, that makes it difficult for doctors is the cognitive load that they have. I mean, there's so many things going on in their practice, in their days, guys. I mean, just think when you're at work and you get a couple of requests from your manager, then you have clients calling you. I always have parts of my day where I'm truly swamped and I have to just shut off everything for a second and regroup because it's like there's too much coming at me at once. And it takes me a minute to really just organize my thoughts and ideas. Imagine being a doctor. You got a patient load, you got hospital administration, you got insurance bullshit you're dealing with, and all these time constraints. It's a lot. You're dealing with your staff. There's always issues coming in, and these are real issues. These are real patients' lives in the line. There's a lot going on in their minds. So they're always looking for, on some of their mental shortcuts that they could do to help, take on this cognitive load that they have to deal with. So again, some of the questions they ask themselves. Number one, do I trust this rep? Is what he's offering, is it easy or is it more difficult? Are other doctors using this? And so it's easy for them to default and say no, because in their mind, they're thinking, I don't have time to learn a new system. I don't want to sit here after everything I have to do. Now I got to worry about, I'm good with the Medtronic system. Now I got to learn the Boston Scientific one too, but it's much different. And I'm just making up examples. I'm not saying there are differences or not, but these are just hypotheticals. But it doesn't matter what the company is. It's difficult to learn something else. And now on top of it, it's not like all those other problems and information you have to worry about every day goes away. This is just another added task. And you were comfortable and happy with what was happening in your outcomes. Why do I need to take on something more? So instead of adding complexity, right? This is a common mistake that reps make. I'll give you two quick, situations here. Instead of adding complexity, you want to reduce the effort. So for instance, instead of saying this system has 12 new features, right? Instead say, this will save you 5 minutes per case. See the difference, guys? If you frame it that you're going to have to do all these other things, it's going to intimidate the doctor. And they're going to go, oh, I didn't sign up for this. You're supposed to make it easier. Talk about how it's making it easier. Talk about how it's saving them time. That is what translates to them. That's what's going to affect them to make a change. Okay, and we'll talk more about that. Next is the trust factor. Guys, this is a tough one. That's why when you first walk into a lot of these offices, you're going to see this when you first break in. And it doesn't matter if you're a new rep or you've been doing this 20 years. When you get in a new territory, everyone has that roll your eyes, oh, here comes another rep when you walk in. Some offices are a little nicer than others, But it's very rare that when you come in, the receptionist is like, oh my God, Joe's here. I'm so happy to see this new rep. No, you're another face out of the 50 that come in every day because they don't trust you. But it is an amazing feeling as you build relationships, as you build trust, add value, that you see that dynamic change. They do go from rolling their eyes to really smiling, jumping, hugging, giving you a kiss. I've seen it all, guys. If you build great relationships, they do become like family in these offices. So it's a great feeling, but it's not going to happen overnight, because what doctors trust right away, they trust clinical evidence. They trust their own experience. And then they trust other colleagues that they respect, other doctors they respect. Sales reps come after all of them. All right. So we have an uphill battle to begin with. That's going to be their default. They're going to disrupt they're going to, trust the data, trust their peers, trust their own experiences. So again, some of the questions doctors ask themselves: who else is using this? You're going to get that a lot, guys, by the way. Is there clinical evidence? So a lot of the startups out there, I know that's what makes it difficult. A lot of times when new products come out, they don't have the data. And going in there without data is tough because you got to focus on those early adopters, those progressive doctors that are really excited just to try new things out. They call them cowboys, that they don't give a shit. They'll try it, but there's not so many of them, guys. There's a lot of those that you got to show me the data, show me the literature if you want me to use this. I need the proof. And then lastly, who else is using this? What are my colleagues saying? So here are some examples that work. Getting KOLs. Those are key opinion leaders. A lot of times when you get doctors that are tough to sway, you get them to go to a dinner, you get them to go to a conference and listen to another key opinion leader speak, or get a one-on-one together where, the key opinion leader speaks directly to that physician. That's key. They trust those individuals. Any other peer recommendations? Again, like we said, conference presentations and published studies. So a surgeon will like hearing when you could say to them, 3 other surgeons at your hospital are currently using this. One of the things you want to make sure, want to watch out for, guys, because again, I teach you all the mistakes that I made, when I started out. You want to make sure before you say Dr. So-and-so or Dr. Smith or that is using this, want to make sure they respect them, because I've done that. I've said Dr. Smith, Dr. Jones is using this to another doctor, and they roll their eyes. And then I find out later on, he hates that doctor. And it's an awkward position to be in, because now you go from thinking that information is going to catapult you to being a step closer to using them, and you actually go 5 steps backwards, because they look at you like, if you're listening to this idiot, then you're an idiot too. And so be careful. Make sure you have an understanding before you start throwing out doctors' names, if they actually respect them, if they view of any of their data as valuable, if they're friends with them. You can outright say, are you friends with Dr. Jones? So a lot of them will tell you, I think he's an idiot, or no, I won't go near that guy. Like they'll be pretty, or they might just say, no, I don't know. And which is fair game to start talking about the success that doctor's having. But make sure you know the situation before you dive in and start, offering the advice from that other physician. Next one, and this is a very powerful psychological principle, and that's the loss. It's loss aversion. Okay. So they fear loss more than gain. All right. And what does that mean? So they're always thinking in terms of obviously harming a patient, complications, procedural failure. If you're going to promise better outcomes, but what if it costs more, if there's more complications? So you could have a great outcome for the procedure, but then there's all these complications afterwards. Or a drug, I know many drugs, like for instance, prednisone. And if any of you guys have been on prednisone out there, it's an amazing drug to help you whatever pain you have, whatever situation. Usually prednisone, it's like Miracle Dust when you sprinkle it on. It takes care of whatever that is. But if you're on it for a while, there's a lot of side effects. So it comes with a lot of complications. So that's why a lot of times doctors don't like to prescribe a drug like that for too long, because it causes a lot of other problems later on that they have to deal with, and they don't want to see their patients suffer. So they're asking themselves, what could go wrong? Will this increase my procedural time? Will this create more problems? So losing feels more painful than gaining feels rewarding for these doctors. So instead of selling benefits, address risk concerns. That's the key here, guys. All right. So sometimes saying this improves outcomes. All right. Now, first off, it's a very generic statement. Instead, say this actually reduces complication risk compared to what you're currently using now. All right. That's more music to their ears, guys. If you can reduce that risk, they're always thinking about legalities. They're always thinking about the problems because they constantly have to deal with these issues. So if you could talk about reducing risk, that's going to go off better than just talking about better outcomes, better outcomes, better outcomes. Realize they're thinking about that. Realize in the back of their mind that what they're doing is working for them and you're asking them to change. So instead of just, for us, it's easy. Oh, it's easy. Just do something new. For them, no, they got to practice. They got to deal with patients, their families. They have, a history of treating patients. They know all the complications that can happen. So you got to realize they've been through this many times. You want to make them feel comfortable that they're going to see less of a risk using you or your product. Next, guys, this is a very important one, workflow. I've seen this too many times, guys, where if you make it more complicated or overly complicated, a lot of times, if it's going to mess up their workflow or their staff, they're not going to change. I don't want to give out any names of companies, but, I've worked with companies in the past, some amazing, some have amazing products, consulted with many companies that they have amazing products. And then they walk me through what a doctor is currently doing. And then this is what their system offers. And it offers a lot of benefits, but it really is like 7 extra steps, 10 extra steps. And you're like, the doctors, if they got to do this and their staff has to do this, that interruption in workflow isn't worth most of the time a lot of the minimal benefits that they gain. So you got to make it simplified for them, because for them, again, doctors, because they're doing something a certain way, just like us going to the gym, you create muscle memory. There's a procedural rhythm. There's an operation workflow, an OR workflow. These guys work together every day, nurses, clinical staff, techs, everyone together, they become a team. You start throwing a monkey wrench in that they all got to start doing different things, and they've done it cases successfully 1,000 times. Now, all of a sudden, there's all these complications. It's going to really screw up their workflow, and it's going to be very difficult for the doctors to want to move forward using that new product. So again, some of the questions these doctors ask themselves are, will this slow me down? Will it slow my staff down? Will the staff know how to use it? And also, will it complicate the procedure? So even if the product is clinically better, if it adds a couple extra steps, the doctors might still reject it. So you must demonstrate, guys, this is the key. It's going to be minimal disruption, or it could save them steps. That's a huge bonus. Saving them time is money, guys. It's that simple. I remember we did a lot of data in hospitals. This is years ago. And there were, a lot of studies in different aspects of the hospital where it saved, it cost them like an extra $75 a minute that's lost, in certain cases. And sometimes it's a lot more than that. So if time keeps adding up, guys, these hospitals, they evaluate all that. They take all that data. You're going to start being one of those companies that's constantly coming in with new procedures that are very time consuming. You're costing the hospital money, and that doctor is going to have to, figure out ways to save the hospital money too. Some don't care, but some are hospital attending doctors. They got to treat this like they're part of this hospital's business. They can't just use whatever they want. Can't just do whatever they want, especially if it's going to cost them more time and money. So you got to think that way, guys. You realize that this is what they're looking for. So again, you want to demonstrate minimal disruption, a quick learning curve, and OR efficiency. Next is a great one, especially anybody that's sold to doctors. There's a big ego factor, guys. And A lot of them, they've earned this. I've worked with a lot of amazing doctors. I've worked with some doctors that I wasn't that impressed by, but at the end of the day, I respect all of them because it doesn't matter who you are. No one gets their MD or their DO or whatever their degree is, overnight. I mean, they spend years in school, anywhere from 10, 15 years or more, from college through residency, through med school, through residency, internship. Some residencies are 7, 8 years in residency. A lot of neurosurgeons, I mean, they don't get out there until they're in their mid 30s, late 30s, till they start actually having their own practice or working in a group. So they put in a lifetime of work. If you're going to come in there as some rep that's been trained for 3 weeks and all of a sudden you think you're going to start telling them what to do, be careful, guys. You could piss off a lot of people. And if you come in with that know-it-all attitude or look to just change everything they're doing, like, listen to me, doctor, I know, you're going to shoot yourself in the foot. Watch it there. You got to be careful. There's a big ego factor, so you don't want to, when you come in there, you got to realize if you're coming in just suggesting change so loosely, you're essentially telling them what they're doing is wrong. And you don't want to do that. So they respond better, obviously, when you're respectful, when you're more collaborative, and when you're evidence-based. So instead of saying you should switch to this, say, I've seen other surgeons who found this helpful I've seen other surgeons who found this approach helpful in some of the cases, just like yours. That's a nicer way of saying you should switch. Because you got to watch, guys. Doctors, they will get very upset with that. And I remember being in one of the cath labs, and one of the reps goes, "Hey, doc, let me show you. Let me show you how to do this." He goes, "Oh, really? You're going to show me?" And he got pissed off at the rep, and he was right. The rep didn't mean it, but he meant, like, let me show you, let me walk you through this. Instead of saying, doctor, I've worked with many physicians and they've tried this approach. I think you might find value in it. Do you mind if I show you? That's different. And let me show you. Guys, that's not going to go well. So you want to make sure that you're really, being respectful for their professionalism, for the time that they spent in this, in their trade to get to where they are. Okay. And they've also, odds are, have done this a ton of times. So realize that. Don't come in there just because you went through that training thinking you're going to tell people what to do. It's a bad approach. It's not going to go off well with the doctors. So just to recap, again, the reasons why these guys say no, it's risk aversion, status quo bias, that cognitive overload, the lack of trust, the fear of workflow interruption, the fear of workflow disruption, loss aversion, and then the professional identity. So again, they don't say no because the product is bad. They say no because a lot of these psychological barriers. Okay. So to succeed, the best things that reps can do is reduce risk, build trust, simplify the decisions, and then respect the physician autonomy. These are the keys, guys. But I'm going to pause right now. James, I know we're going a little quicker than normal. I actually have a hard stop today at 3:50. So any questions from the crowd?
Yeah, we got a couple, Joe.
Awesome.
Let's run through them. Mike runs trails. I always thought docs made decisions based purely on clinical data, but sounds like there's way more going on under the surface. What percentage of it's actually emotional versus logical?
But I don't know the percentage, but I wouldn't say that it's, I think it's both. Sometimes it is logical. I mean, sometimes it is illogical where you have all the data out there and they're still unwilling to change. Sometimes there are other factors. They could, they could just, their niece could be the rep at another company and they're not making a switch because of that. You don't really know, but I don't think there's an exact percentage. It's a hard answer to give on how much I think is more emotional and logical. That's a tough one. So I would say, not to, cop out with this answer, but it could be 50-50. It really depends on the doctor and the situation and whatever that product is.
Lift, eat, repeat. Josh, do physicians even want reps coming in anymore, or has the whole dynamic shifted post-COVID? Feels like access is way harder than it used to be.
Yeah. So the quick answer is yes. Doctors still want to see reps. Okay. Reps do bring a lot of value. Has access gotten worse and worse over the years? Absolutely. Absolutely. I've mentioned this on a couple other podcasts. I am so excited because we're going to be doing this podcast soon that I'm working with a company that is an AI driven company that's going to be able to get reps information in their hands about the doctor, about their practice, about their workflow. It's going to give all that conversation, that information that can take, sometimes 10, 15 conversations with doctor in your hands before you walk in that first call. And that's so powerful. And the reason why this going to be such an amazing product is because of the access issues. So when I started almost 25 years ago, you literally could put on scrubs, walk into a hospital, sign in. They didn't stop you. You go into the hospital lobby, you go in the lounge, you could wait outside the operating room when doctors came in and out. Hey, Dr. Jones, I want to show you something. What do you think of this? I want to show you this study, or let me show you this product that I have. And that was it. Now, there's vendor credentialing. So a lot of you out there that don't know what that is, it's basically a credentialing site that allows you to get into the hospital or not. And if you don't have all your vaccinations, you don't have all your continuing education, all the requirements, all the paperwork, and there's always a new requirement that comes out. And sometimes you have a case that's booked that day. If you don't have your vendor credentialing set up and you don't have access, you are not getting in that hospital. And then sometimes it's even gotten to another level now that even with all your documentation, even all your vaccinations, you can have an appointment or a case with a doctor. If their office didn't put you down and enter you into the system to come in and be allowed into that case, at the front desk and security, they stop you guys. It's a no. So you can actually imagine some of those reps, and I've been a part of these conversations where reps had a case and they couldn't cover the case. They wound up losing the procedure because the doctor said, well, screw this. I'm just going to call another rep because you couldn't even come in. Try explaining that to your hiring manager. It sucks. So the access issue is real. It is getting worse and worse, and you have to get more and more creative to get your messaging across to doctors. But to sit here and say doctors don't need reps, no, absolutely not. They do, but the best reps find creative ways to get their messaging across to those physicians.
The plant-based Pete. What's the biggest mistake newer reps make when they finally get in front of a physician and have their attention?
They talk too much. That's the biggest mistake. They don't ask enough questions. They get in there, and I say this because I made all these mistakes. When I first started selling NuvaRing, that was my first pharmaceutical, my first medical sales job was in pharmaceuticals. So it was a vaginal birth control. And I was going office to office. I'm like, wow, no one will see me. This sucks. And then finally, one of the receptionists was like, yeah, Dr. Jones in the back. You can go see him. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't even know what to do. I'm like, I'm going to see this doctor. I walk in the back and the doctor literally came out and was like right out of training. Joe, what do you got for me? And then I just started rambling, features and benefits, pulling out detail aids, pointing to things, doing everything they taught me in training. And it's the worst approach, guys. You want to ask questions, get information. The best thing you can do, and it's going to piss off your managers, but you could tell them I said it. I don't care. Ask questions. Try not to mention your product on that first call. It's going to force you to ask more questions. You need to learn about your doctors first. You got to learn about what their drivers are, and then you can sell. It's like simply, going out and getting pizza, for friends that for people that you have a couple coming over to your house, you go out and get pizza because everyone loves pizza, right? And now, meanwhile, you never ask them if they eat pizza. They could be allergic to tomato sauce, whatever the hell it is. You can go out and get steaks and they're vegan. The only way to know, guys, is ask. So you should be doing that. You should be calling up people. Hey, what would you like? That's what normal people do. We're having dinner tonight. What would you like? You don't just say, "Oh, we're getting pizza tonight." You're shit out of luck if you don't like it. No, guys. So you got to make sure you're asking these questions. Doctors might not even use your products or that class of products. I've done that. I know I told this story many times. I sold spinal cord stim. First 3 calls I went in with this doctor, I was so excited to see him, and I never asked him if he does spinal cord stimulation. I just kept talking about the product, selling the features and benefits, and he kept smiling. I wasn't asking any questions. I'm an idiot. So you got to ask questions because that's the best thing you can do. Ask more questions and stop with the features and benefit dump. That's the worst thing you could do when you start.
James Whitmore, great name, dude. I'm a district manager, and I try to coach my reps on this, but it's hard to teach because so much of it's situational. What frameworks do you give newer reps for reading the room quickly when they finally get in front of a physician?
Well, I mean, again, if you're asking more questions, they should be interacting with you. They should be more engaged. If you're just data dumping them and you see them writing down call notes, they're not even looking up at you. They're talking to people in the background, talking to a nurse. I mean, guys, these are kind of common sense things. But if you want to bring them back in, ask questions. That's going to engage them. You need to ask compelling questions. If you're just going to data dump, you're going to start noticing, a lot of ahas, looking around. You hand them a study. That's another thing that a lot of reps do as a mistake at the beginning. They get the study and they hand it to the doctor. Don't do that, guys. You want to be in control. You want to hold the study and be pointing to the sections in the study. You don't just give them a study and say, this is a great clinical paper from, Ohio State. You don't want to say that, guys. You want to get to the points in the study and direct them exactly what sections you want them to see. But keep them engaged. So if you see them staring around, again, that's when you want to make sure you have a study in hand, you have a detail aid. A lot of times reps, they make this mistake too, and they lose doctors. They hand them the device or product right away. And then they start talking about it. And what does the doctor do? Starts playing with it. Starts going like this. He's not listening. He's just playing. It's like giving a kid a toy. If you give them a toy, they're not going to realize what you're saying. They're going to just play with that toy. So describe it first, engage them though, ask questions, and then you can have them actually play around with whatever device or whatever that is. But that's my advice. Some of those cues are just common. When you see people not really fully engaged, the key is to bring them back. And that's by asking them questions, getting their opinion, seeing what they think about a study. Don't just say, this is a great study. Here's what I want to show you in this data. Ask more questions. And then that'll help bring them back in.
I got Casey, mom of boys 17. Joe, this is great. One of the hardest things for me personally is getting in front of physicians. I'm always stuck talking to the MA or office manager. Does influence happen through them, or is that a dead end?
No, it's a great idea. I mean, it could happen through anyone in the office. But the key is don't give up. If you can at least get to them, you're steps away than a lot of these offices allow reps. A lot of reps, they get the door shut on them every time. The receptionist is there. He doesn't see reps. You'll see. I mean, I had many doctors. You walk in, he doesn't see reps. Now, the bad thing to do though is when you get doors shut like that is to keep doing the same thing. Stop going to that doctor's office at 2:00 every Wednesday. I mean, it's just stupid. Change it up. Try to go early before he gets in. Wait for them in the parking lot. I mean, I've done this. If you really want to get FaceTime, do that. But the fact that you are working with an MA, the fact that you are working with an office manager, that's great because they could have a lot of influence to get in front of that doctor. So keep making that, we all have heard the total office call, but keep doing that, because you never know who has influence over that doctor. And straight up ask them, I know the doctor sees somebody. How do these reps get time with the doctor? What do I need to do? Is there any data? Is there specific information? I got a ton of data here. Just help me navigate that. And the more you get closer with these individuals, you'll see doors go from being shut to now open a little bit to completely open as you get closer to these individuals. So keep doing what you're doing, but keep trying to move the ball forward. If you're just speaking to an a PA or an office manager for 6 months straight, again, you got to change it up. You got to figure out another avenue, because these people too could be dead ends too. If they're not helping you get your information or moving the ball forward, guys, you got to figure out another avenue.
I got Coach Damon reacts. Do you think the rise of group purchasing in hospital systems has basically taken individual physician psychology out of the equation, or does it still matter as much at the point of care level?
That's a great question. And, to some degree, they have taken a lot of the influence out of these individual physicians being able to just pick whatever they want. A lot of times it does suck the way the system is to save money. I mean, we have our healthcare system is broken. No one's going to deny that. A lot of these companies, they lose money. The only way they make money is through endowments. I mean, literally, they lose money every day. And if they don't get endowments, they're not going to be open every year. So you see a lot of hospitals closed, and they're run really well. It's just a lot of things in our industry is tough. So they're going to get dictated to a lot from purchasing, from materials management, from administration, that they need to start saving money in different avenues. They can't just everyone wants the new greatest and best product. There's a lot of amazing products out there currently, guys, that would knock your socks off, but they're not in the hospitals because they can't justify the cost. It happens sometimes. Sometimes there's just amazing products that could bring a lot of benefits, but the cost is just way too high for them to justify the benefits of purchasing that. So it is a business. So at the end of the day, a lot of times these doctors, that's why they have a lot of committees. That's why you'll see the P&T committee, the Pharmacy and Therapeutics Committee for approving new drugs. You'll see the VAC committee. That's the Value Analysis Committee. That's to approve new devices. So it's usually compiled, the VAC is compiled of different personnel throughout the hospital from different departments. It could be, doctors from different departments, nursing, administration. They'll have a group that meets once a month, every other month, where they evaluate different products. And it's not like a doctor could just come in and be like, I love this product, approve this, and they approve it. No. Some doctors have more say than others. Some have very little say, depending on your rank, your prestige, the business you bring into the hospital. All that plays a factor. It's still a political game too, even with doctors. But it's gotten less and less that a doctor, they have a less pull or sway to come in there and just say, I love this product. Let's get this in the hospital. That's less and less. That's why they have more of these decision makers made by committees or made by the ivory tower, miles away from where the cases are actually happening.
I got Marcus Webb. The tension between building a genuine relationship and always having a commercial objective underneath it is something I think about constantly. Physicians are prospective people. Do you think that most of them can sense when a rep is relationship building with an agenda versus actually showing up as a trusted resource?
Yeah, I think doctors can tell. I think the key to me, there's that bullshit factor, which doctors, there's a lot of nice doctors out there, and there's a lot of great reps, but a lot of the friendly reps that are just coming in there, they're always coming in with a coffee and donuts and whatever. I mean, they've gotten less promotional material now, but they always have like a trinket or gadget that they want to give as promotional material. A lot of that has changed over the years, but at the end of the day, I think they could see through, individuals that are just there, putting a smile on their face, which is nice, but they're gonna lose patience for those individuals quickly if you're not bringing value. If you're not, guys, if you're just constantly coming in there with the smile, you look good, you're fit, you're handsome, pretty, whatever the heck it is, and thinking that's going to constantly get you time with these physicians, it's going to get old quickly. You have to focus on bringing value. You have to focus on understanding what their key challenges are and trying to provide solutions and be a solutions-based rep. That's where you go from being a rep to a consultant. Okay, so for any of you who have been out there and they start saying, oh, the rep's here, the reps here. That to me was like a curse word. That was like an insult. You know, I like when they got close to you and they say, Joe Licata's here, Joe's here, you know, and they look at you, they start looking at you as an extension of their practice. That's the key. You want to be looked at as an asset. When you could get to that level, that's when you're going to see the success. So being friendly and just being liked, it doesn't go too far, guys. I'm telling you.
We got Carlos Vega. I've heard people say that you should mirror physicians' communication style. Like if they're blunt and short on words, match that energy. Is that actually effective, or does it come across as fake if you're not naturally that way?
I mean, if you know a doctor is always, you know, always in a rush, always busy, doesn't like to waste time, then don't waste time too. Don't sit there. I mean, read the room. Mimicking the doctor, that's nonsense. I mean, you're going to come off as fake. You know, if you're going to start acting like the doctor just because the doctor speaks really fast, you're going to start talking really fast, you're going to sound like an idiot. Don't do that. Be yourself, but also, again, read the room. If you called on this doctor and every time he's like, Joe, I only got 30 seconds. And all of a sudden you're like, let me tell you a story. All right, you're blowing it. You know, but you always want to be effective in your concise, but effective in your messaging. You know, we talk about this all the time in the RepPath Academy. It's about being effective in your messaging, but also being concise. That doesn't mean imitating what a doctor's style is, you know, but just read the room. That's the best way to put it, guys. If you know you got 10 minutes, the doctor, you're sitting down for a lunch, you know you're going to be sitting with them for 20 minutes, half hour, okay. But don't just imitate them because it's going to come off false because that's not you.
Let's see. I got Patrice Younger. Joe, I'm working in pharmaceutical sales right now, and I'm trying to break into the device side. The decision-making cycle seems so much more complex on the device side. You're dealing with surgeons who are very set in their technique. How different is the psychology when you're asking a surgeon to change something that's essentially muscle memory for them?
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly what we talked about on this call. It's not easy. It's not. You know, it's going to take time. They've been doing something a certain way, and you know, you got to walk that balance beam, not insulting them and saying what you're doing is wrong. You know, you have to show them, like we talked about, how this minimizes risks, how this, you know, shows them that it could save them time, it could save them money. You know, it can not only improve outcomes but reduce complications. And go over some of the things we talked about in this call, on this podcast, you know, and that's a way to help effectively make them, you know, get them to make change. But it's not easy. I say all these things, guys, and I'm very real. You know, I don't sit here and go, guys, look, just follow what I'm doing. It's a piece of cake. You know, no, it takes time, guys. It takes a lot of effort on your end, you know, and even doing the right things. You could do everything I say. You could call on a doctor for 2 years doing this, and they might still not use you. That's just the name of the game. That's sales. That's why it's not easy for anyone. They wouldn't pay these high salaries if it was. Anyone would do it. They want individuals that have that grit, have that persistence, you know, and that ability to constantly adjust what they're doing and provide value.
Got a couple more for you, Joe. Stephanie Osi. There is this one surgeon at a hospital I'm targeting who has a reputation of being almost impossible to get to. His staff is very protective of him or of his time. What's the psychology behind getting through gatekeepers when the doctor has essentially built a wall?
Yeah, and that's treating them, you know, with importance. You know, don't treat them like a gatekeeper. Don't do that. You know, don't walk in there every time and be like, hey, I mean, one of the key things I've seen, a lot of reps don't even learn their names. They walk in, it's like they're stepping over a mat. Don't do that, guys. That's the worst thing you could do. It's disrespectful to anybody. To me, I would treat everyone, I don't care what their level is, what their title, you treat everyone with that respect, and that's going to help you. You treat them the same that you treat the doctor. You know, there's sometimes, guys, that you always think, yes, the doctor 99% of the time is going to be the decision maker in an office, you know, but when you get to more complicated systems like hospitals and surgery centers, You don't really know. You don't know which doctor is the key decision maker. It could, and they are heavily influenced by purchasing. Sometimes they're heavily influenced by office managers. So you could be ignoring an office manager that could be the doctor's wife or husband. Now what? They could be the decision maker. This is their family business. Believe me, those are typically the toughest individuals they're married to the doctor, and they were running that practice. They're going to have a huge say in what goes on there. So treat everyone with the same amount of respect. And that's how you'll get past a lot of these gatekeepers. You show them respect, you show them time, you start talking to them about what are some of their challenges, what are some of the things that you might be able to help them with. You never know, guys. Believe me, I've seen a lot of creative reps figure out things that help them out too. All of a sudden, those doors start opening when they said the doctor doesn't see anyone. They'll be like, you know what, Joe, wait over there. He's going to be coming out in a couple of minutes. You see that all the time. And that's from working and providing value to everyone in the office.
Since we got a 350 hard stop, I got one more for you.
Okay.
David Prieto. From a leadership perspective, I think one of the hardest things to coach is emotional regulation when a physician is dismissive or even rude in front of staff. I've seen reps completely lose their composure in those moments and destroy months of relationship building in 60 seconds. What do you teach around staying grounded when a physician is being genuinely difficult?
Yeah, I mean, this is typical customer service, guys. It doesn't matter if you're a sales rep, if you're working as a waiter, you're dealing with the public. It's same thing with dealing with doctors. Sometimes you want to punch them in the face straight up, to piss you off. But you got to maintain your cool, because at the end of the day, you don't take it personally. There's sometimes that doctors, they could have had catastrophic events happen that day in the operating room, or one of their patients, something could have happened catastrophically, and they take it out on you and they're rude to you. A lot of times that happens, especially in the operating room. I've seen doctors freak out on reps. I've seen them freak out on nurses, on staff. And at the end of the day, you can't take it personally. Don't lose your cool. It's the worst thing you can do. You get in your car and curse them out and do whatever you want afterwards, but keep your smile, maintain your cool. Don't get abused. I'm not saying to get walked over and have a doctor just, tell you off, scream in your face. I mean, you're not going to take that, but you're also not going to scream back at them. You're just going to kindly smile, walk away, and you live to fight another day, because that's rare when it happens, guys. And most doctors, the next time you come in, you're going to see that they're, a different person. It's rare that a doctor, if they're going to be abusive every time you walk in, screw that doctor. Just that simple. Nothing is worth that. But that's so rare. At the end of the day, just maintain your composure, be calm. Don't lose it. Don't drop down to anyone's level, whether it's a doctor or another staff member, and you're going to see that the cooler mind will prevail.
That's it today, Joe. We got one more minute before your hard stop.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you. Thank you, James. Thank you, guys. A lot of great questions. I think this is a very important topic, guys. Really, if you're watching this once, rewatch this one, because this is key. This is going to make you a better sales rep. If you could think like your customer, no matter what you're selling, and understand what they're going through, understand their psychology, what they're thinking. It's the same as when you're working with recruiters, working with these hiring managers. Understand their psychology if you're trying to break in. Stop thinking of it from your point of view. You got to think of it from your customer's point of view, and that's how you'll be successful. So please make sure, again, we don't have to pull up the website again. Go on RepPath.com to get more info about the RepPath Academy. Schedule a call with me. Click the link below. And then for any lobby members, please make sure that you're submitting the promo code Licata, Licata. Again, that's also on the bottom of the screen. This time I spelled it right, James.
I was just going to say, you spelled your name right this week.
I beat you to it, buddy. You're not going to get that in. So I know you too well, dude. I actually hear you breathing, like ready to say something. But make sure you submit the promo code Licata so you can get additional discounts. And that's it for this week, guys. Please make sure you're tuning in, as always, every Monday and Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern. If anything, you have any other questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm here to help you guys. Have a great week and a great weekend. Take care.